FPS upscalers for most games, and frame generation for any graphics card, including laptops and even integrated graphics. These are bold claims from a developer in charge of a $7 add-on tool that you can get on Steam. We're talking about lossless scaling in their newest 1.0 update, where we're going to test a variety of games in scenarios to see if this works what it claims to be, a be-all, end-all solution, or is it something that's just fun to play around with. So first, let's explain exactly what I'm talking about. There's a game, well, not really a game, but it shows up in games, called lossless scaling. Basically, it's a separate program that you can run that costs little to no resources, and you can interject your own upscaler into most game, in quotation. By default, it uses a variety of upscalers, AMD FSR, NVIDIA NIS, and their own custom upscaler, LS1, which basically is like a better FSR. One thing to note, they are using AMD FSR 1.0. To my knowledge, I don't think the developer has commented on adding in 2.0 or 3.0, but considering that is going to open source by the end of the month, I would not be surprised. Now let's talk about the 1.0 update that launched a couple days ago. This is the big one, because on a surface level, this program that is $7 just introduced frame generation across most, if not all, titles for any graphics card, which is kind of wild to think about. Now it does come with a lot of caveats. So we're going to go over those first, and then we'll get into the easier, just normal upscaling talk, which is pretty straightforward. Now, regarding frame generation, or the LSFG, as they call it, it only works to a resolution up to 1080p at the moment, and you have to lock your frame rate to half of your refresh rate. That's another caveat. And the third being, your refresh rate cannot end in an odd number. So a lot of you have 165 hertz panel. If you lock your frame rate to half of that, it's not going to work. You can only do even numbers. Examples being 120 hertz, 144 hertz, etc. Now, with all that out the way, let's talk into the technology itself. Now, personally, I have really no gauging point for frame generation. I do not own a 40 series NVIDIA graphics card, and also I haven't played any games that utilize the FSR 3, because AMD has their own frame generation that works on any graphics card, but that's neither here nor there. But I don't believe it works to this degree as far as like these caveats. So initially, once you get everything set up, right now I have my refresh rate to 144 hertz. So that means I need to go into my NVIDIA driver and set the maximum frame rate to 72. Once we do that, we'll head into our game. Today, we're going to choose Halo Infinite to start. And one more thing before we get started, you have to make sure that your game supports windowed mode or borderless full screen. Once all that's done, you open up your seamless scaling window, and I have frame generation on. The aspect ratio is on auto, and the scaling is off. And if you want to, you can even set up a hotkey to do it in game. You don't have to tab out. And now we're going to press the scale button. It'll give a 5-second countdown. Now this is important. You need to tab back into the game as a way to show the scaling thing on what to frame gen or scale or whatever. Because I was reading up on the article that videocards.com made, and basically the developer has this set up like an overlay, hence why the foolishness that you're gonna see is happening. So the quickest way you can tell that frame gen is on and working is the UI. If you move around the screen, you'll see the UI gets very ghosty. It gets very like wiggly and everything. That is a known problem, which doesn't really have a solution from what I can read from the developer. Because like I said before, it acts like an overlay. So it's, essentially you have the game is a layer, and then over that layer you have the weird frame gen stuff that happens. And since this is working outside of the game, it's not working with all the developers in existence that have ever made a game, he can't put his layer like below the UI to make it not so wiggly. But it is what it is. And honestly, personally, it does feel a little bit more responsive. It's just it's a little bit of a black magic trick because the FPS is capped at 72. So you're looking at the FPS to change because when frame gen is on the 40 series cards, I think Cyberpunk is one of the games that you would use that on, the FPS like doubles and you can visibly see the FPS counter go up. But for this implementation, you actually can't do that because you have to lock your frame rate to half of your refresh rate to get this to work. So it's always going to be, 72 FPS, but it's generating frames to be at the 144. I think that's what it feels like you're locking your game to 70 FPS or 72 FPS, but it's using the frame gen thing to make it feel like and run pretty smooth, like if you were playing at 144 hertz or FPS or whatever. I think that's what they're going for with this, but it's hard to show you guys what I'm talking about because literally the number doesn't change. So in a nutshell, that is the frame gen. Pretty much it works across all the games that I have on me that I've tested. So that's pretty cool. Now this next part is actually pretty quick to talk about. It is regarding the AI, well, not AI, but the upscaling part of this that's outside of frame gen. So like I stated before, you have FSR, you have the developer made LS1, you have NVIDIA's NIS, and you can basically use those across any game that has borderless windows or windowed mode. Well, most games, I should say. And using that is actually pretty straightforward. You do not have to lock your frame rate, by the way. If you're not using frame gen, you do not have to lock your frame rate for the upscaling thing. That's only for frame gen to get it to work and interlace and whatever. Now, once you get that set up, set it to whatever resolution you want to do, yada yada. You want to set your aspect ratio to custom, and the scale is how much work do you want the scaling to give you. So generally, I'm using 1440p at the moment, so I have the scaling set to 1.5. You can also go lower than that. Lower is higher. So the closer you get to 1.0, that's going to be your native resolution. And the higher you go up is going to be the downscaled resolution. And by now, I'm sure most of you know how upscaling works. It is downscaling the native image and then upscaling it to give you higher, frame rate with, hopefully not a noticeable difference in quality to give you more FPS. And that is basically what it's doing right now. And I was able to test this across a couple different games. Some of them did not want to play nice with this feature because it either had a really wonky windowed mode or had a weird borderless windowed mode or, borderless full screen mode. So you're gonna have to try it out as you go along. So if you do use this, you'll have to, try it out and see what works and what doesn't. The good news is it'll actually tell you when it doesn't scale or when it doesn't work. You just have to tab out and actually look at it. It'll be blinking and it'll tell you what's going on. Now, the final conclusion to all this upscaling shenanigans is at the end of the day, it's a $7 product for something that may or may not work in the games that you have. So is that $7 going to be worth it to you in the long run? I guess it depends on whether or not you're constrained in certain titles or if you just want to mess around. $7 is not a lot of currency. It's like a coffee at Starbucks, basically, or a little bit more than that. But I thought it was be a pretty fun video to show off kind of what's going on with this. And on paper, it does sound too good to be true. So I know a lot of people are kind of holding off on this. Now, my final thoughts on this is there's a reason why this type of technology is made by a offshore developer, someone outside of Intel, AMD, NVIDIA, because hypothetically, let's say this software works flawlessly and you can, do it however you want it. You didn't have to do any half refresh rate, frame rate nonsense. What would be the reason to upgrade your GPU? Let's say you were playing on a GTX 1080 Ti and you were still able to play the latest titles with this feature, getting like 110 FPS or whatever, playing at 1440p. Well, already you're not going to want to spend your money and upgrade something because you're already getting optimal performance. So that would automatically stagnate the entire industry. No one would buy GPUs or CPUs or whatever every 2 years, 4 years, if your hardware already overly performs at the resolution that you're playing at. So it would literally cripple the industry. That's the main reason why these functions don't really get rolled out too often, because at the end of the day, these mega corporations are corporations. They want your money. They want you to upgrade. And this basically, it cuts out their bottom line. Stuff like this. Now, I don't think this is going to get a cease and desist order or anything, because this is like, you know, his own thing. But, you know, yeah. Oh, also one more thing. This feature works like an overlay, as I stated before. So it has no like banning or anything. It's not malware or anything like that. It's not going to get you, you know, banned or anything in any of the games. It doesn't work like that to that degree. Yeah, and that's kind of the end of the video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. And if you want to comment down below on what other weird stuff has popped up in the last couple months or so, I'll definitely check it out. Leave a like and go and check out the next one.